Alright guys, welcome back to the drama of Formula 1 after a mighty recovery drive from Fernando Alonso to take his car that was damaged in an incident with Lance Stroll all the way up to P7 at the end of the race. Haas has launched a protest against the safety of Alonso's car. The FIA agree, have given him a 30-second penalty after the race has concluded, and now Alpine are protesting Haas's protest. It's madness. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Lots to talk about, of course, with the race. Drama from start to finish. First corner drama as usual. George Russell plows into the side of Carlos Sainz, gets a 5-second penalty for it. He admitted afterwards it was his fault, even though at the time he did say Sainz cut across him. In fairness, Sainz, you could argue, look, just get away from the line better and you'll be okay. At the same time, Russell was a bit too optimistic, to be honest. Tried to go down the inside of Lewis Hamilton, and then Sainz, after losing the position to Max, decides, okay, you know what, I'll come out to the left-hand side, try and get better traction and potentially get the move done on Max again going into turn 2, 3, 4. But I mean, yeah, pulling out to the left there, George was in position and just plowed into the side of him, broke his radiator, and that was GG for Sainz's race in the very first corner from pole position. So tough scenes. Russell, I think, deserved penalty. At the same time, like, I don't know, Sainz probably will think, you know what, maybe I could have just stayed behind Max rather than pulling to the left, because I don't think Russell really expected that to be happening. And I think sometimes it's one of these first lap, first corner incidents where, you know, 5-second penalties are kind of like the standard thing to happen, even though, like, it did ruin Sainz's race, which is always tough. And the same, you could argue, happened to Perez back in Austria. And, like, it's not like Russell has the greatest record of incidents on his side this season, as we see some examples here, as even Sainz says, angry and disappointed. Someone who wasn't even fighting comes from behind and throws me out. The 5-second penalty was not enough compared to my retirement try. It's always tough to say balancing the penalties compared to the outcome, because it really shouldn't be about the outcome that matters. It's more about the incident itself. Just because Sainz retired shouldn't really mean that, like, Russell gets any more penalty in theory, but sometimes it is how it's done. But in this case, I think, you know, just tough scene. It's a racing thing, and the penalty, I think, was justified, and even Russell did admit his fault afterwards, but as said, really, to the team and also to everyone, that, like, he needs to get better, and this weekend was not a good performance from him, pretty much from start to finish, to be honest. Now, of course, this was the key instant of the race. There was the first safety car after Bottas had a gust of winds, spun out on the final corner, that's what he reckons at least, and stuck it in the gravel, had to get a safety car for that. Safety car restart happens. Stroll, after a great start to the race, finds himself a little bit down the pack after getting, I guess, unfortunate time with the pit stops, and then Alonso goes into the back of him. Now, it wasn't Alonso's fault, this. Remarkable instant, the fact that this wasn't as consequential as it could have been, because when I saw this, I was like, this could have been a really scary accident. I mean, look, at the end of the day, this is Stroll's fault. He moved over on the straight. You can argue, okay, yes, he did leave Alonso a lot of space on the left-hand side, but at the end of the day, Alonso had no DRS. It was literally the first after the safety car restart, so the only way Alonso's going to get this move done is to get right in the slipstream, then pull out to the left-hand side and make the move happen. If he had DRS, he could have pulled out earlier and there would have been no issues. But yeah, Stroll, I guess, doesn't really look at his mirrors properly or whatever, thinks Alonso isn't as close as he is, tries to move to the left to defend, and Alonso really has no option than to just run into the back of him, destroys the rear of Stroll's car, spins him out of the race. The guys behind did pretty well not to crash into Stroll, in fairness, because could have been a horrible accident. And then Alonso is literally flying off. Now, I wonder, if not for the wind tunnels and the Venturis, like, I do wonder whether the car would have just flown into the air, just because obviously the ground effect creates the downforce now from the bottom of the car. Wasn't happening in previous years. So I wonder if that, like, was a crucial factor in actually keeping Alonso's car on the ground here, because otherwise could have been a lot worse. And he gets really lucky with where the car ends up as well, because he ends up flying into the barrier, and as you guys can see here at the top, this barrier is curved. If he'd have smashed into this part of the barrier, would have been bad. He actually only clips the wall pretty much, and actually can keep going. His front wing is completely destroyed, but he actually somehow keeps going and pulls off an unbelievable recovery drive to get to P7, despite the fact that that issue was playing in his mind the whole race, because he felt very lucky. I mean, imagine you're in his shoes, you're looking up in the sky, you can't even see what's below you. Your car's literally tilting up in the air. I mean, Alonso's been involved in some horror crashes over the years. This could have been one of them. Thankfully, both drivers kind of get away with it. And in my opinion, outside of Sebastian Vettel, who was given the driver of the day, Alonso was right up there. To me, it was Vettel, probably, you know, Verstappen, Alonso, Hamilton were the top four, at least in my books. And Vettel also had a phenomenal day. If not for the poor pit stop at the end from Aston Martin, he would have been even better off. But he did get to make that phenomenal pass around the outside of turn 16 or whatever against Kevin Magnussen at the end of the race. So Vettel Vettel, Alonso, they were carrying some of the entertainment factor of this race. Now, Stroll gets given a 3-place grid drop for this. You could argue it should have been worse. At the end of the day, his move was very dangerous. I think he did deserve certainly a penalty. I might have given a 5-place or something, but yeah, 3-place grid drop might be affected by the fact that Alonso didn't go so hard on him. Now, you can understand this. Like, imagine if that was Hamilton versus Alonso. Can you imagine what Alonso would have been saying? It would have been, well, as long as both guys are okay, it would have been entertaining. But against Stroll, Alonso's future teammate, right? I mean, Alonso's going to work for Lawrence Stroll, of course, Lance's dad, at Aston Martin next year. So he doesn't really want to say too much against his son, despite the fact that I'm sure what he's saying publicly in terms of, yeah, unfortunate racing incidents probably isn't what he thinks privately, but he wants to maintain those relationships with his future teammate Lance Stroll. So understandable, maybe Fernando kind of has let Lance Stroll get away with it a little bit here. And look, his race wasn't ruined, so I suppose he also doesn't feel too bad as a result of it. Now, after the race concluded, Fernando, as I said, made a crazy recovery to P7, carved his way through the field, great pit stops from the Alpine team, good strategy. They put themselves in position, and from that moment to get the wing fix under the safety car again and recover like that to P7, remarkable drive. Now, after the race, Haas were launching a complaint. Now, you can understand Haas's complaint, and it does seem to me like there is some inconsistency in the way the FIA rule these things. So they were not happy that Perez and Alonso were allowed to keep racing with broken cars. We've seen a few times this season already when Kevin Magnussen gets into a first lap incident and gets some damage on his kind of an end plate on his car, and we've seen already at least 2 times this year the race directors will wave a black and orange flag. That means you've got to come into the pits and change that front wing because that piece could fly off and then cause damage to other cars. And Magnussen's had to do that twice so far this season, maybe even more than that, and Haas are not happy about it, right? Now, yesterday in the race, Perez, after a first lap incident with Bottas, don't really know what Perez was doing, but made the move stick anyway. I think maybe it was 3 or 4 laps until his end plate really started to come loose, and then it was about 2 more laps until it literally flew off. And I think Perez was lucky, really, that the end plate flew off the car at about 200 miles an hour and just flew off to the side of the track and didn't really affect anything. But if that had flown into someone else's car, punctured a tyre, it could have been bad news. So that's the reason why the black and orange flags come out, to force the driver to pit and change their front wing. Now, of course, in this case, Perez wasn't asked to. I think, honestly, that if Perez had gone round maybe 1 more lap, they probably would have called him in to do it. Like, they usually take their time, 1 or 2 laps to make up their minds. I don't really buy into this whole conspiracy that they're just favouring Red Bull here. I think it's kind of like just Red Bull got lucky in this instance that Perez got away with it and it flew off safely before they could really call him in. But still, Haas weren't happy, I think understandably, that there does seem to be some inconsistency in the ruling from the FIA on these subjects. And the same complaint was then raised against Alonso's car, because look, you can't really blame Haas here in a sense, because they've been screwed over, you could argue, by this before, and Magnussen did a great job to get P9 and get 2 points, so they thought, you know what, let's try and get another one, right? Why not push for even more than that? Turns out they get away with it. So Günther Steiner says, look, Alonso should have been disqualified. He had no safety equipment, so his right wing mirror was obviously damaged in the initial contact with Stroll, was flapping about all over the place, and eventually flew off. So he lost his wing mirror, and at the end of the race, the FIA inspected the cars and said, yep, all fine, no problem at all. I believe even Hamilton a few years ago, actually, maybe 2019, lost a wing mirror, and look, it's not ideal, but, drivers are pretty good, they can get away with it, they can use the other wing mirror, and yes, it's not ideal from a safety perspective, but, you can kind of maybe drive with it, right? It depends what the race directors want to do. Günther Steiner says, look, how he lost it, I don't care. That car was not in a safe and drivable condition. So Haas then launched 2 protests, one against Perez for the end plate, which was not called in for, and then one against Alonso for losing the right mirror. Now, the FIA looks at this and actually initially said, well, after the race, they inspected the car and said, yeah, all's good, no problem, Fernando P7, congratulations. Turns out when the the penalty comes through, well, at least the protest comes through from Haas, then they look into it and say, actually, yeah, you're probably right, dish out a penalty. Now, this was a stop and go 10-second penalty that would have been applied because it wasn't served in the race and they applied it after the fact. That 10-second stop and go, we have to come into the pits and stop and then go again after 10 seconds, results in a 30-second penalty. That put him all the way down to P15. Vettel gets P7, Magnussen P8, Tsunoda P9, Ocon P10 at the end of it, and Alonso again, after doing such a mega job, gets, well, really unlucky, honestly. Like, none of this was Alonso's fault, let's be honest here. Like, Stroll takes him out, then he comes into the pits, mega recovery drive, and, finishes no problem at all, and still the FIA managed to take the points away from him. So, remarkable what Alonso's gone through this season. And, this is the thing. Haas actually said, or at least the FIA, the steward said afterwards, the thing is, really, they wouldn't have done this if Haas didn't protest. That's what's strange to me, because the stewards are deeply concerned that car 14 was not given the black and orange flag, or at least a radio call to rectify the situation, despite the 2 calls to race control by the Haas team. So if race control was so keen on this black and orange flag, why didn't they just wave one for him? Like, they could have said to Alonso, you know what, like, we're not happy your car's in a safe condition, you've got to retire the car. Like, but they didn't do that. They let him race the entire time, make the drive, recovery drive to P7, as I say, and they were seemingly perfectly happy with it for the entire race. Apparently they made a couple of calls to Haas to say, you know what, we're not sure about this, like maybe bring him into either retire, because they can't fit the wing mirror back on, like that's probably not going to happen, so that's really the only option there. But yeah, remarkable. Like, if they really do think that the car was unsafe, then why not just do that at the time? It would have been unfortunate for Alonso, but why does it take a protest to happen from Haas before they say, actually, you know what, you're probably right here, and yeah, indeed, we are going to disqualify him effectively from the race, putting him down to P15 after the massive penalty. So yeah, really strange situation. And of course, Haas even argued that Perez's car was unsafe, but of course it flew off at a very optimal moment for Perez, so he kind of got away with it there. But and yeah, he eventually keeps P4. So yeah, really strange situation. And the thing is, actually, that makes it even funnier is that Alpine are now protesting the protest, because it turns out that Haas submitted the submitted this protest 24 minutes after the deadline. So there's some sort of deadline for these protests to be submitted after the race. And as Alpine say, the team also believes, due to the protest being lodged 24 minutes past the specified deadline, it should not have been accepted, and therefore the penalty should be considered as invalid. As a result of this point, the team has protested the admissibility of the original protest. So, I mean, honestly, it's just Formula 1 comedy at its finest. But yeah, that is where we bring it to today. I think probably the FIA will stick with this and say, you know what, Haas are probably right. But still, the fact that at the end of the day, they are kind of admitting to using a protest to change the result of the race, despite the fact that that protest shouldn't have been admissible, you could argue, because it was submitted past the deadline. So, look, what do you guys think about this in the comment section below? Personally, I think Alonso's been robbed hard here, to be honest, and it does mean that this is the top 10 as it stands. Vettel gets a well-deserved P7, I must say, but still, Alonso also deserved some great points after that drive, and won't get any because the FIA can't make their mind up during a race what they want to do, and it takes a protest to change their mind. So I don't know what to say anymore. Just the good news is that Alonso's all okay, because it could have ended much worse with everyone involved yesterday, and it's crazy really that Alonso was even able to continue driving after that crash. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, take care, and I'll see you next time.